The restaurant that the high school dropout reserved sure is terrible. Let's head back. At the welcome party for the new employees, I had reserved a fancy restaurant. As usual, the director Michael, who always looks down on me as just a high school dropout, said that to make fun of me. This is why incompetents are useless. Really, what a waste. He probably said that to ease the tension for the new employees and make everyone laugh. However, he was the only one laughing at that moment. Since I, the target of his words, was feeling down, it created an awkward situation where no one could really laugh. But, oblivious to the atmosphere, Michael continued to badmouth me in the restaurant. Little did he know, he would face despair in just a few seconds. My name is John. I work for a company related to food ingredients. I joined this company after dropping out of high school, so my highest level of education is junior high school. Most people around me are professionals with college or vocational college degrees. Being someone who didn't even finish high school, I always had a complex feelings about my educational background for various reasons. In a group of people with brilliant careers, I often worried whether I could shine as well. But still, I love my job. I'm determined to push past these feelings of inferiority. I carry this strong will and pride in my work. I started working right after dropping out of high school because I had no other choice. There were unavoidable reasons. Mom, when I was in 6th grade, the house was unusually quiet when I came home from school. Normally, my mom would be either doing household chores or watching TV in the living room. But that day, there was no sign of either. No laughter from variety shows, or busy footsteps could be heard. Feeling something was off, I searched the house. Mom, I'm home. She was nowhere to be found in the living room or kitchen. Not in the bathroom, nor did it seem like she had gone out. The car was parked properly, and besides, I entered the house without taking out the key from my backpack. I thought she might have forgotten to lock the door, but seeing her usual shopping bag at home, it seemed unlikely she was out. Maybe she's doing the laundry. With that thought, I hurried upstairs. As I made my way up with heavy footsteps, I felt a warm breeze from outside. Good, she's up here. She must be on the balcony, taking in the laundry. That's why the window was open, letting in the outside air. Thinking so, I headed towards the balcony. Indeed, the window was open. I'm home, Mom. Feeling relieved, I greeted her louder than usual as I returned home. But there was no reply. The sense of relief quickly turned back into anxiety. I knew that if I looked over the balcony, I would see my mom taking in the laundry. Yet, for some reason, I was scared to look. But I had to check. I wanted to share stories about my day at school. I wanted to give her the invitation to the parent-teacher conference. With that in mind, I steeled myself and leaned over the window frame. The first thing I saw was the laundry basket. And then, Mom, there she was, collapsed against the balcony wall. I reflexively threw down my backpack and rushed out in just my socks. She always scolds me, "Wear your sandals outside," but that was the last thing on my mind now. Mom, Mom, I called out to her several times, but still, there was no response. She seemed to have a wound on the back of her head, perhaps from falling. What should I do? What should I do? To make things worse, there was no one else at home. My dad was at work. My second-grade sister, Emily, had said she was going out with friends and their parents. And my kindergarten-aged brother, Sam, was at an overnight daycare. I was in such a panic that all I could do was shout, "What's going on, John?" But my shouting had an effect. I made such a scene that the neighbor from the house next door spoke to me from their balcony. "Mrs. Wilson, Mom has collapsed." "What? Call an ambulance." I reported the situation to her, half crying, and she rushed in with a pale face. That day, I never got a moment of peace. It seems she contacted my dad's workplace from the hospital where my mom was admitted. My dad left work early and rushed to the hospital, while Mrs. Wilson stayed with me. I stayed home to wait for Emily's return. I tried to do my homework, but I couldn't concentrate on anything. I attempted to distract myself with video games, but I couldn't focus at all. I had no appetite, and I couldn't sleep even after lying in bed. Emily, tired from playing, had already fallen asleep. I just watched her innocent sleeping face. As I spent my time like this, the doorbell rang. It was past 11 p.m. Yes, it's me, John. Standing at the front door was Mrs. Wilson, the neighbor. She's usually all smiles, but not today. I couldn't see her face clearly in the dark, but she avoided eye contact the whole time. "How's Mom? Is she staying in the hospital?" John, listen carefully. As she spoke, it started to drizzle outside. As Mrs. Wilson hesitated to speak, the rain began to fall harder. Soon, the droplets were pounding on the asphalt, but all I could hear was my own heartbeat. "Your mom, she passed away at the hospital." I couldn't comprehend what she was saying. No, that's not right. I didn't want to understand. My mom, who was laughing and lively just yesterday. The same mom who was always nagging me about doing homework and taking a bath. She would no longer say anything to me. I couldn't accept this reality. A year has passed. Attending junior high school, I started doing the household chores in place of my mom. Taking care of Emily and Sam was quite a task. Dad helped when he could, but there's only so much he could do after working late. "Thank you, Mrs. Smith. Goodbye," the class representative said that, and the homeroom period ended. While my classmates headed to their various clubs, I quickly packed my bag to head home. Normally, club participation is mandatory, but I was given special permission not to attend. Looking back, I'm grateful to have attended a school that understood my family situation and related issues. Man, my bag is heavy on the way home. I shop for dinner almost every day on my way back from school. I try to keep my load light, but somehow, I ended up with more stuff today. And of all days, it's the day I need to buy vegetables. Maybe I should go home first. I can't miss the vegetable sale today. I can do this. I've managed this same pattern before. If I rush home, I should just make it in time. And that's pretty much how my junior high school life goes. Hurriedly returning home from school, cleaning, doing laundry, shopping, and preparing meals. I spend most of my time on these chores. Mrs. Wilson, who knows our situation, picks up Sam from kindergarten since I couldn't make it in time. He stays with her until either Emily or I return from school. He must be a handful, but I can only be thankful to Mrs. Wilson for doing this. Well, dinner prep is done. The younger two finish their dinner and bath first. Then, I do the laundry, which has become our usual routine. I used to clean at this time too. I'll clean when I get back from school. Emily offered to do it, so I let her. I was a bit worried at first, but it turned out to be an unnecessary concern. Maybe she paid close attention to how Mom and I did it. Emily does such a good job, there's nothing to complain about. Now I need to eat and study until Dad gets home. As tests approach, the amount of homework increases. Sometimes it takes until midnight, but I don't want to use my family responsibilities as an excuse. I try to manage my time efficiently, regularly reviewing my studies. Well, thanks to this, I often can keep up with my friends' conversations. As tough as these days are, I've found a few small joys in my life. Wow, I can't believe how much it shrinks after cooking. It's about cooking. I'm fascinated by how vegetables, meat, and fish bought from the supermarket transform into delicious food. More precisely, What I enjoy is the transformation of ingredients. When you heat a pile of vegetables, their volume decreases significantly. Firm fish becomes flaky and tender when you boil or grill it. The flavors and final presentation change depending on the types and amounts of seasonings used. This magical transformation is fascinating to me. I'm not particularly skilled at cooking itself. I've always been clumsy with my hands, so I knew it wasn't my forte. Maybe I'll work in the food industry in the future. That's what I vaguely thought at that time. When I became a high school sophomore, life got a bit easier. Emily and Sam grew up and started helping out with household chores. I still didn't join any clubs, but the rush of junior high school days has lessened. However, another nightmare struck our family. A call came from the hospital to our home. Dad. When summoned to the hospital, I saw Dad lying in bed. Apparently, he had collapsed suddenly at work. "I'm sorry, John." Dad was always energetic, but at that moment, he weakly apologized to me. According to the doctor, it was the result of accumulated fatigue exploding. Since Mom's passing, Dad had been working late every day. Although he survived, it seemed impossible for him to work as hard as before. I had been careless, thinking he was always been energetic, but the consequences of overworking always come back to haunt you. "Don't worry about the house, I'm here, and both Emily and Sam are doing good." I said this to reassure Dad, but I wasn't reassured myself. We had savings, but they would run out soon. He needed to be hospitalized for a long time, which meant a period without income. Driven by this anxiety, I decided to drop out of high school and chose to work. As a result, I joined the food company where I am now. Although it was not under ideal circumstances, I managed to realize the dream I had since junior high school. 3 years have passed since I started working. I couldn't even follow complex adult conversations, but I managed to keep going because I enjoyed the work. If there's one concern, it's this. "Hey, John, another mistake. This is why high school dropouts are troublesome." That's my direct supervisor, Michael. "Sorry, I'll correct it right away." The mistake was my responsibility, but being berated with the term high school dropout doesn't seem quite right. Moreover, it's not done privately, but in front of the entire office, a large group of people. Initially, I didn't feel any particular way about my educational background, but after being ridiculed by Michael, I started to feel embarrassed. Most of my senior colleagues are college or vocational school graduates, and I often feel out of place. "Hey, John, you know the new guy coming in?" Michael, sitting next to me with a sneering smile, said. "The new recruit coming soon, who will be my junior, seems to have graduated from a prestigious private university. He apparently belonged to a food-related research lab there. I bet he'll be a lot more capable than some high school dropout." Is that so? I wonder if I could have fixed my mistake in the time spent on this conversation. Focusing on Michael's taunting would eventually break me mentally. In my first year, I realized this and started internally retorting every time he said something. Surprisingly, this was quite effective, leaving me unfazed by anything other than the shame of my educational background. Funny thing, some in the department are suggesting you as a mentor. How about that? Me, a mentor? Surprised by the sudden news, I looked at Michael's face. I thought he was serious, but he was smirking again. "Yeah, but that would be the other way around, wouldn't it? The other way around. You be the one being educated." Leaving just those words, Michael went back to his own seat, laughing loudly with a gah-ha. What a waste of time to take him seriously. Soon after, the new employee Michael mentioned arrived. He was a bright, impressive young man, older than me. He had a wealth of knowledge and experience and was quick to learn the job. I felt like he would surpass me in no time. I thought his arrival would be a great boost for our team, but his excellence only provided Michael with more fodder. You're really excellent, aren't you? Hardly any mistakes, just what you'd expect from a college graduate. The new guy, a bit embarrassed, repeated his thanks. Right, John, you think so too, don't you? Here we go again. Michael was asking me pointedly, his face bearing the usual mocking expression. Calm down, John. Getting angry or upset is exactly what Michael wants. Yes, I do think he's really amazing. Ha ha ha, look at you, acting all high and mighty for a high school dropout. Michael said, laughing. The new guy, others from our department, and I all had strained expressions. Doesn't he realize he's spoiling the office atmosphere? This guy here is a high school dropout. But hey, whatever. If there's anything, teach John a thing or two, will you? Me? Teach him? That's right. He doesn't know anything. In front of a laughing Michael and a forced smiling me, the new guy looked uncomfortable. Hey, you know what? Suddenly, as if remembering something, Michael pointed at me. Such rudeness, not just as a boss and subordinate, but even as human beings. But pointing that out to him would be endless. We're having a welcome party for this guy, and you're going to reserve the place. Pick somewhere fitting for a grand debut, all right. Understood, I'll handle it. I was surprised at the relatively reasonable instruction. What about the number of people and the schedule? What? You figured that out, you're the organizer. Okay, I got it. Our department has more than 10 people. Arranging everyone's schedules will be quite a task. And came the day of the welcome party. Having managed to coordinate the schedules, I reserved a high-end restaurant in downtown. Since Michael insisted on you decide regarding the budget, I chose an expensive place. It's probably going to be covered by expenses anyway. Everyone gathered at the agreed time, so I, having made the reservation, led the way in. We were escorted to a spacious room, with higher-ranking members seated towards the back. Wow, this is a nice place. The decor is nice too. Our department head, James, and the senior employees seemed pleased with the restaurant. The new guy looked really nervous. It must be his first time in a high-end restaurant. Overall, the reception seemed positive, but Michael alone looked unimpressed. I couldn't hear him clearly, but he seemed to be muttering under his breath. Let's say it again. Thanks for joining us. We welcome you. When James spoke as our representative, the new guy responded shyly in his usual manner. There was applause in the room, showing the warmth of our department. Michael, your turn. Michael, who had been sitting back with his arms crossed, remained in the same posture but started speaking when prompted by James. Just like James said, we welcome you. Coming from that famous university, you are already an elite. Unlike some incompetent, we have high hopes for you. We're looking forward to working with you. Not this again. Thinking this, I put on a forced smile. The atmosphere of the welcome party, which had been pleasant until a few seconds ago, began to turn a bit sour. As the course meal we had reserved was served, some time passed. However, Michael kept bringing up my education, tying every topic back to me. The senior employees tried to change the subject, but Michael would start berating with "this is why high school dropouts" at every opportunity. His persistent remarks were starting to get to me. The food, which should have been delicious, didn't taste quite right due to the stress. Does Michael forget that this is a welcome party for the new employee? Seems like he's just using the occasion to feel superior. Just when I was beginning to question this, a beautifully cooked steak was served. The steak was made from a premium-grade beef, skillfully prepared and marinated with red wine, making it a delicacy that worth of a high-end restaurant. The restaurant's website had boasted this as a specialty, so it must be delicious. A premier-grade beef steak, let's see. Michael took a bite of the red meat and, for a moment, his eyes widened before he set down his knife and fork. After chewing a few times and swallowing, He inexplicably turned his gaze to me. "Well, this is definitely a place John reserved." "What do you mean?" I asked, not understanding his implication. Ignoring me, Michael put his knives back. He pushed the plate to the center of the table, indirectly suggesting someone else eat this. Apparently, it didn't suit his taste. He slurped his drink noisily and looked at me again. "High school dropout's choice of restaurant is lousy. Let's leave," he announced loudly. With that remark, tension swept through everyone. The room started buzzing. "No way. Is he serious?" they murmured in disbelief. "Hey, Michael." James, shaking with anger, addressed Michael, who was smugly enjoying himself alone. He was visibly pale and extremely agitated. Just then, a man appeared, opening the sliding door. He was a large figure dressed as a chef. "What's going on?" Sensing the odd atmosphere, Michael started looking around. James, still pale, informed him. "This restaurant is one of our major clients." "What?" Michael was stunned by James' words. Observing this, the chef also spoke up. "You're Michael, right? Do you not recognize my face? As a department head, he should at least recognize the face of a major client." But Michael looked confused and scared. Well, the owner of this restaurant, David. Have you forgotten?" "Oh, yes, David. Of course, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot," he said, layering excuses over a forced smile with a gentle tone. But David saw right through him. "Didn't you find our food to your liking?" "No, not at all. It was very delicious." "But just now, you clearly said it was awful, didn't you?" It seems Michael's comments had been overheard. Michael's forehead was covered in sweat, clearly hit where it hurt by David's words. Michael still tried to make excuses. It was just a joke. Just playing with my subordinate. Right, John." He turned to me with the biggest smile I've ever seen, seeking help. After constantly belittling others, now he wanted help when in trouble himself. I couldn't help but feel the urge to vent all the frustration I had accumulated up to that point. "Really? To me, it seemed like you genuinely found it awful," I said, and Michael frowned. He thought he was jumping onto a lifeboat, but it turned out to be a sinking ship. He shot me a look that said, "You'll pay for this later," but at this point, I didn't care. Come on, John. This isn't the time for jokes." "Enough already," David shouted loudly at Michael, who kept repeating his pathetic excuses. The sheer force from the large chef made everyone in the room visibly flinch. "Do you understand why I shouted at you, Michael? It's because I said the food was awful." Michael's demeanor was like that of a child being scolded by his father. I couldn't help but feel a laugh bubbling up inside. I know it's not the time to laugh, but I couldn't help it. "No, that's not it." David shook his head in denial at Michael's dejected muttering. Looking straight at Michael, he continued. "Tastes differ from person to person. Whether you find it delicious or awful, you're free to express your opinion. But," he said emphatically, raising his index finger, "firstly, you're a department head, aren't you? Not remembering the face of a major client is simply too careless. I'm sorry." Michael straightened up and apologized. David then raised his middle finger. "Secondly, mocking John for his struggles. You keep taunting him about being a high school dropout, but is educational background that important? Can't you see he's working very hard under someone like you?" I was so moved I nearly cried. Meanwhile, Michael's face clearly showed confusion, as if a big was floating above his head. He was puzzled as to why a client's owner would address me as John. It's utterly heartless to mock someone based on their education without knowing their circumstances. Even after being told this, Michael still seemed unable to grasp the words of David. Well, it's not surprising. I never talked about my family situation at work. One day in my sophomore year of high school, after my dad had fallen ill, I took Emily and Sam to visit him. We were allowed to bring fruits as a gift, so we brought that along with some pajamas. Really, these were just excuses. I was just too worried about him. That's why I want to ask you, my best friend. As we reached the front of the hospital room, I could hear my dad's voice from inside. It sounded like he was having a conversation with someone. All right, leave it to me. From the sound of it, the person was not a doctor. Maybe a relative or someone else. With that question in my mind, I opened the door to the room. Here we are, Dad. Oh, John. In the room, there were my dad and another man. He was a large man with a slightly intimidating appearance. He had pulled up a folding chair and was sitting close to the bed where my dad was lying. Hello. I greeted him as our eyes met. Emily and Sam followed my lead. Hello. The man replied in a deep voice. Despite his looks, he seemed like a kind person. I'll be stepping out for a bit. The man waved to my dad and quickly left the room. Who was that? Hucko, that's a friend of mine. He came to visit. I see. Visits usually involved similar conversations. We talked about how school was going for the three of us, if there were any tests, and how our grades were. It was just typical, lighthearted parent-child conversation. When the younger two weren't around, we also had more serious conversations. These discussions would be about the future, the household's finances, and such topics. After that, we'd peel the fruits we brought and eat them together. Today, it was an apple. I clumsily did my best to peel it. We ate the unevenly cut pieces, laughing together. When it was time to leave, Emily and Sam needed to use the restroom, so we used the one at the hospital. While waiting, I bought some tea from a vending machine and sat down. Then, someone approached me. Hey, you're John, right? Yes, that's me. It was the man from my dad's hospital room. He was holding a can of coffee and sat down next to me. You're a friend of my dad's, right? Yeah, I'm David. Nice to meet you. After introducing himself, he took a sip of his coffee. Your dad, he's really worried about you three. Feeling strangely tense, I quickly drank about a third of the tea I had bought earlier. So, he asked me a favor. A favor? Yes, to keep an eye on you three. He said it was not about the money, but just to watch over us three. To be someone we could talk to if something came up. I was told that he had requested just that. Learning that my dad had made these arrangements without my knowledge, I couldn't hold back my tears. By the way, John, do you have any dreams for the future? A dream? Well, it's vague, but I've been thinking about doing something related to food ingredients. Food ingredients, huh? Hearing my reply, David started to ponder, resting his chin on his hand. After a few seconds of him, he turned his gaze back to me. I run a restaurant. Through my connections, I might be able to introduce you to a company related to food ingredients. Really, I couldn't help but feel excited, and I started consulting with David about various things. I shared about the struggles I had faced, the hardships of my life, and the joys I had discovered amidst it all. I also mentioned my thoughts about dropping out of high school and getting a job, motivated by my desire for my sister and brother to live without hardship. Gradually, I became friendlier with David. Eventually, I got a job at the food company he introduced me to. It was the same company I work for now. The reason I could make a last-minute reservation at this highly sought-after restaurant was twofold. I was acquainted with David, the owner, and he was a business partner. Faced with these facts from David, Michael could only stare blankly. After a moment of silence, he finally spoke, his eyes filled with tears and his voice trembling. But still, John, being a high school dropout, must have many things he doesn't know. So you curse him with foul language. Is that what a supervisor should do? True, I often feel the lack of knowledge compared to others. There's naturally a gap between someone who dropped out of high school and someone who went to college and did research. Knowing this, I've always tried to absorb everything I'm taught. I believe I'm not behind college graduates in terms of effort. But, enough, please leave. Sitting at the head of the table and mocking your subordinates, just to bask in your sense of superiority, I've seen enough. Unable to bear David's intense gaze, Michael quickly gathered his things and left the room, almost fleeing. No one tried to stop him. Sorry, this was supposed to be a welcome party, wasn't it? I apologize for spoiling it. David, now calm, apologized to the remaining people. No, please, don't worry about it. James responded in the awkward atmosphere. We finished the food we had reserved, and the welcome party came to an end. David didn't say he would stop doing business with us. Just say hello to Michael for me. That was all he said as we left. I was glad things ended smoothly. But I couldn't feel entirely relieved. This whole situation had been caused by my personal circumstances. I left for home, feeling somewhat unsettled. As a side story, the incident was reported to President Johnson. Michael was apparently ordered to stay at home for about a month. With Michael gone, my feelings of inferiority about my education were relieved. I wish things had turned out well, but unfortunately, that wasn't the case. Weeks have passed, and the incident at the restaurant still lingers in my mind. I was protected by David, but I didn't actually do anything myself. This isn't good. I was overwhelmed by an indescribable sense of unease. While harboring these anxieties, a few weeks later, I received a phone call before the start of the workday. In the office, it was just me, the new guy Ryan, and Michael, who had returned. Ryan, try answering it. Okay. Michael, a bit subdued since that day, prompted Ryan to answer the phone. Though quieter, it's not like Michael had a change of heart about me. He's not harsh, but he seems a bit cold. Yes, good morning. Yes. Oh, are you okay? I could only hear Ryan's side of the conversation, but it sounded ominous. Understood. I'll let Michael know. Please take it easy. After hanging up, Ryan approached Michael with a solemn expression. Apparently, one of the senior employees had the flu and was calling in sick. Got it. Just great. Right at the end of the month, I thought it was pointless to complain about it when the phone rang again. Ryan answered again. And during that call, another one came in. A familiar number. It was from a senior colleague's cell phone. Good morning, this is John. Hey, John, good morning. Sorry, but I've got the flu. Can you tell Michael I'm taking the day off? He, too, was calling in sick. The flu is going around lately, but I didn't expect so many people to catch it all of a sudden. Understood. Please take care. I hung up and looked at Michael, just as Ryan was telling him about the second call. Another one. Okay, and John, it's the flu for him as well. The news has been saying it's especially spreading in schools. People with kids are particularly susceptible. In the time before the workday started, more calls came in. James and other seniors, all down with the flu. Only Michael, a few seniors, myself, and Ryan were left unaffected. What are we going to do? This was a bad situation. As Michael grumbled, it was indeed the busiest week of the month. We had more work than usual. This was going to be a tough day. End of month meant deadlines for submitting reports. There were materials to be sent out to clients requested by the sales department, so those needed to be prioritized. Although most of the materials were nearly complete, covering for everyone who was absent meant a huge workload. John, go to the records room with Ryan and get these documents, and fast. Right away. I looked at the messy handwritten note with about 10 document names on it. They were all relatively recent, so it shouldn't be too hard to find them. I'll hand you the documents I find. Can you put them in this basket? Understood. Ideally, I should teach Ryan where and how the documents are sorted and stored. But today we were in a race against time, so I decided to teach him later. I quickly returned to the office with the documents for Michael. You're slow. This is why we can't rely on high school dropouts. Sorry. I was berated as usual, but Michael's expression was serious. Not his usual mocking self. I could tell he didn't have the luxury to tease. We were all pressed for time. It was past midday. It wasn't just about creating documents for clients. They needed to be approved by a supervisor, in this case, Michael, before being handed over to the sales team. That's the protocol in our office. Michael, I've sent 4 documents for your review. He didn't respond. But our eyes met, so I assumed it was okay. John. Joe, what's up? While I was working on the 5th document, Ryan approached me. He turned his laptop screen towards me. What should I do in this case? For this, you do it like this. I wished I could teach him more thoroughly from the ground up. But again, we didn't have the time. I quickly provided a solution and returned to my work. I see, thank you. Feeling relieved that the issue was resolved, I noticed Michael staring intensely at me. Michael, something wrong? No, nothing. Keep working. Don't waste time talking. Despite his stare, I mentally grumbled and resumed my work. By evening, I had become more accustomed to the hurried pace of preparing documents. It seemed manageable. But then, one of the seniors stopped working and seemed troubled. Are you okay? I might be in trouble. He said he was feeling feverish, nauseous, and had aches all over his body. Not being a doctor, I couldn't make any irresponsible statements, but judging from the situation, it seemed like the flu. After consulting with Michael, we concluded it was better for him to go home rather than risk spreading the infection. Sorry for leaving at a time like this. I'll take better care of my health. The senior left early, apologizing and looking guilty. We managed to complete the external documents just before the end of the day. But our work wasn't finished yet. With those down with the flu absent for the next few days, we had to get ahead on their work too. Or we'd be overwhelmed. As a mentor, I guided Ryan while we both continued working. I worried about making mistakes but prioritized completing tasks. Finally, that night, we're done. The last task of the day was finished. The senior's words of relief seemed to lift the weight off everyone's shoulders. The clock was already pointing past 11 p.m. Yes, thanks for the hard work. I noticed that Michael, who had stepped away from his seat, was handing out canned coffees to everyone. He gave them to the seniors and Ryan, and finally approached me. John, can I talk to you for a sec? Huh? His demeanor felt different from usual. His voice and face were serious. He gestured with his thumb towards the office entrance. It was a summons. Just wanted to say, good job today. Thank you. As I accepted the canned coffee he offered, he unexpectedly apologized. John, I'm really sorry for everything up until now. Michael apologized to me. And I was utterly bewildered, not understanding what was happening. Watching you work today, I realized I was wrong. I had wrongly judged you as incompetent. Michael, who had labeled John as incompetent, was surprised to see him work efficiently, contrary to his expectations. In a critical situation, John not only took on the role of a mentor, but also managed his tasks well. He was surprised to see this. I once failed university entrance exams 3 times. I had a dream school, you see. Despite his efforts, Michael apparently never got into his first choice university. Told by his parents that they could no longer support his education, he had to settle for a much lower-ranked university. That failure has always been a complex for me, so I took it out on you. trying to feel superior. Everything David said was right. Suddenly hearing his true feelings, I was even more confused. I wanted to say something but couldn't find the right words. But after seeing you today, I realized that a person's worth can't be determined by their education. You really did great. Thanks for your help. His words cleared the unease I had been carrying since the welcome party. I, a high school dropout, had managed to prove myself useful. That was so gratifying, it brought me to tears. We didn't resort to something as formal as a handshake at that point. Instead, we toasted with canned coffee in the hallway, tears streaming down my face. After that incident, Michael stopped his high school dropout bullying. Hard work gets recognized properly. A simple truth I had finally achieved. Seniors who saw me working hard late into the night, and those who heard about it, praised me. The atmosphere in the office improved, allowing me to work more freely and comfortably. I finally began to truly enjoy my job, which I started because of my love for food ingredients. One day, I took Emily and Sam to the cemetery where our mom rests. We cleaned her gravestone, set some flowers and incense, and paid our respects. After a few seconds, I opened my eyes. "Mom, I've got some good news." I briefly shared recent updates and then stepped back. I brought Emily and Sam forward so they were clearly visible to our mom. "Look, they've grown so much. It hadn't even been a year since our last visit, but kids grow up so fast. Our family's finances aren't tight anymore. I started working, and Dad is slowly getting back on his feet. So, I want the two of them to chase their dreams, not worry about the household. If they want to get a job, that's fine. If they want to go to college, that's fine too. Above all, I want them to confidently pursue what they feel passionate about." As I said this to them, a refreshing breeze blew. The flowers that we brought swayed in the wind. To me, it felt like Mom was nodding in agreement.